Okay, we'll go with it that way. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you very much for having me return to Lithuania. This is, I believe, my 12th visit to your beautiful city and your wonderful country, and it feels like home, and it has changed since I was here last. I used to come every year for this conference, and in fact, the first time I was in Lithuania in January of 2000, I missed the birth of my first grandchild. She was born early to her parents, my son and his wife, while I was in Lithuania. So I remember spending one of the nights awake the entire night, receiving phone calls from the United States, and finally the child was born. And the teachers, some of whom are in this room today, gave my granddaughter Olivia a wonderful party on that year. And that began a long tradition of my coming back to Lithuania. In fact, I think of this place as Olivia's birthplace. In some unusual way, this is where I became a grandma. I missed the conference the last 2 years because there were other grandchildren born, and I had decided that I would be present as much as possible for those births in the United States. So I am now 4 times a grandma, and like Piaget, although I don't compare myself to him as a researcher, I have a captive laboratory in my own family for my research and for development of my materials. And I will say that when my 3 children were young and when they were, growing and maturing, they were my laboratory in some way. But when you're the mother, when you're the parent, and you're in, we say in the trenches, in every moment with your children, sometimes you miss the developmental milestones, or I certainly missed some of the musical milestones because I had so much responsibility. But when you're the grandmother and you don't have that responsibility, you can experience all the joys of the children, and you can watch them grow and mature in different ways than you observed in your grandchildren. So I'm working especially, or working is not the right word, I am especially enjoying my 2-year-old grandson, Jude, because his parents live fairly close to me. They live in New York, and I live in Philadelphia. And I spend about 2 weekends a month with Jude, sometimes more. Usually he comes to my house because he loves to come to Mimi's house. My name is Mimi for Jude. And so I will tell you some Jude stories in a minute, and Jude has really guided my thinking about how music can and should be used in the family, and how that then can be extended into music in the schools. But first I want to thank all of the presenters, all of the speakers this morning. Thank you, and say, maybe not thanks, because as I've listened to you for the past hour, I've completely changed what I wanted to say to you today. They have guided my thinking into some new directions, and actually you have provided me with the answer to what was going to be my primary question of today, which is, why is music important in life? Why is it important for us to teach music to children? And I heard a perfect answer here today. It was something like, music is integral to life. I believe that. I'm sure you believe that. We're all musicians and we're teachers. We believe music is integral to life. There are very few moments in the day when I don't have a song playing in my head. It's like an internal soundtrack that goes in my brain. And I'm not listening to, I don't have to have my earphones on and be listening to my favorite tunes on the iPhone or the iPod. It's the musical life of my brain. And it guides me emotionally. It helps me emotionally. It guides my thinking sometimes. It's always there. So I have this understanding that music is integral to my life. But I've been wondering about how integral is music in the lives of others, of non-musicians. When I speak to a non-musician, even a family member of mine, and I say, I always have a tune in my head. Or they'll say, why do you walk that way? Because when I walk, it's rhythmic, It's because there's a tune that's guiding my walk. It determines the tempo, it determines the style of my walk. It's just the way it is. It's a surprise to me that some people don't have that internal, constant tune. So So my answer, which I received from one of you this morning, actually from several of you this morning, is that music is integral to life. It's the essence. It's part of the essence of being human. It should be integral to education. But my observations, I'll think about Jude and my other grandchildren who in their home life have music present almost constantly. There's music interaction in the home. The adults are singing, singing tunes as they do the housework or as they drive the car. They're singing tunes to the children. There's music playing in the background, could be classic rock or classical music or something else. Music is integral to family life, at least in the families I know. And yet when our children come to school, music is not integral to the education process. Music is separated out. It isn't part of math. It isn't part of social studies. It isn't part of the daily life. Music is a place where you go. You go to the music room and you get music done to you, or you make music there. Music is a separate part of the curriculum. And of course, I would like to see music restored, or not restored, but made into an integral part of the curriculum, used for math and science education and social studies and all of those kinds of good things. So I want to, if I want to go back there. All right, so my topic is Voices of Tomorrow, Children of Today, and it reflects my thoughts about music and family life over the past couple of years. The voices, when I created the title, I meant Voices of Tomorrow would be, how are we going to educate the children of today so that they have this music as integral parts of their lives when they grow up? Music as part of their personality. I began to think about it differently a couple of weeks ago when I was thinking that I was part of educating the children of today, like 40 years ago when I was raising my own children. So I'm experiencing a multi-generational effect of music education and music in a family life. By the way, I wanted to share this photo with you. This is a photo taken from Canada looking south into the United States, and it's such a beautiful mountain picture with the lake view. It's Lake Waterton, Canada. I thought I would show you a little bit of my country today. Okay, so there's the question. What is the role of music in the lives of students, of children? How's it going to function? Is it going to be part of every aspect of their life or something separate, something that people do different? And then as educators, we need to think about what factors do we consider when we're making decisions about teaching music? Okay, they're kind of separate issues, but they're related. At least I think they are. So at first, here's the education needs part of it. I look at, and used to look at, music education in these ways. You have children's musical development in the middle. So we have a practical task to develop the musicianship of the students we teach. And at least in the United States and in many places in the world, our first approach is a practical approach. It's experiential, it's theoretical, it's guided by some methods that are familiar. You may be familiar with the Orff method, developed by Karl Orff in Germany and now used throughout the world. Or perhaps the movement work of Rudolf Laban, which has been integrated into Orff's Schulwerk. Or perhaps you know the work of Zoltan Kodály. I think Kodály's work might have more prominence in the world than any other. Or perhaps you know a little bit about the work of Edwin Gordon, a United States music learning theorist whose work has been prominent for the past, I'd say, 40 years in the United States. Most of us know something about the Suzuki approach. It has a good stronghold here in Lithuania. It's worldwide. It's known everywhere. Or perhaps you're more familiar with the Dalcroze approach, the movement approach, Dalcroze eurythmics. So we have all of these practical methods and several more, but I just named, maybe the 6 most prominent. And we go to music school and we learn how to teach these methods. And sometimes we commit ourselves to these methods. I've done this twice. When I was a young teacher, I became completely enamored of the Orff method. I loved the movement and the creativity and the improvisation that went along with the Orff method, and I went a long way, I'll say, into that deep cave and studied Orff's work and used it in my teaching. A few years later, after I'd been teaching about 15 years, I really began to study the Gordon method because I liked the psychology of music approach to it and the fact that it brought in the elements of psychology and language learning and child development and helped to create a really integrated sort of 20th/21st century picture of music education. So these are all the methods that we use, or these are some of the methods that we use in education. But nowadays we have so much good research out there that can inform our music teaching that to be a well-rounded music teacher, to be someone who really helps integrate music teaching into the life of children, we need to be aware of the research that's being done. And not only the music or music education research, but research in other fields. So we need to know about child development. For us to know what's appropriate for a child of any age, we need to know what skills that child might have. You know, I'm an early childhood specialist, and the people who study with me are often, they're not yet old enough to be parents, and they haven't had much experience with babies or with toddlers, and they don't know that if you try to play a peekaboo game or a hiding game with a 6-month-old child, it doesn't work because they don't understand, you know, peekaboo, like, peekaboo. They don't understand it. They say, okay, mommy's still there. Now her hands have moved. They don't get it. So you need to know about child development to really be an excellent music teacher. You also should know a little bit about language learning and how does language learning relate to music learning. Well, a couple of the answers might be that both music and language are learned through the auditory system, and so there might be some relation in the way they're learned. They at least go in through the same physical system. They go in through the auditory system. There are some who believe that in language learning, for example, linguists say the human voice, whatever the human physical mechanism, is capable of making 53 separate and distinct sounds. In English, we call them phonemes. They're the whatever, all those phoneme sounds. The voice can make 53 different configurations of this. However, most languages only have between 14 and 18 phonemes. And so a child who hears only his own language from birth forward sort of loses his capacity to make those other 39 to 45 phonemes. But a child who hears different languages during the first 2 or 3 years of life can retain those capabilities to make all the phoneme sounds, and thus later in life may have an easier time learning different languages. And for example, in my own family, my daughter, the mother of Jude, has taken this very seriously, and so he just turned 2 years old, and he's now going to study Mandarin Chinese, because Chinese is one of the most difficult languages, and it has one of the broadest spectrums of the number of phonemes. And so she's convinced that if he studies Chinese and some other languages, he will be a better linguist as he grows up. And she believes languages, knowing how to speak many languages, will be of benefit to him. So if we know about language learning, it might affect our music learning. If you take that idea that the human vocal mechanism can make 53 different phoneme sounds in language, and if you hear a rich language environment when you're young, you might be better able to speak all languages. You could generalize that concept to music learning. In other words, perhaps children's music experience should not be limited to very simple songs, simple rhythms, and simple pentatonic scales, but should be broadened and richened, and children should hear music in many different tonalities, keys, tempos, rhythms. So language learning informs us in terms of the richness, the potential for richness in a child's music education. We also need to study music learning. You know, all of these methods that I mentioned, Orff, Kodai, Dalcroze, Laban, Gordon, Suzuki, all but Gordon's methods were developed early in the 20th century, some of them before that. And there's been a great deal of research and a great deal of new information available in the area of music learning and the psychology of music. since that time. So perhaps some reading in the psychology of music is very important. And then I've put up here the importance of communication and emotion. Music can be a really valuable tool for communicating with one another or for communicating with yourself. In a few moments, I'll show some research slides that I've put together, and the people I interviewed speak to the importance of music in the emotional life or in regulating emotion, and I found that to be a very interesting concept. So now I want to go back and tell you some stories about Jude and how Jude and his family members have used music as a tool to integrate or to regulate their daily life. If you are a parent or a grandparent, you have these kinds of stories about your family too. So Jude was born almost like 2 years and 1 week ago, and Jude was not a child who slept well. He could sleep during the day, but when it came to night and he was supposed to sleep through the night, he would be very restless and he would cry, and his parents couldn't get him to sleep, and they were very distressed. It was their first child, and they thought a child should go to bed at 8 o'clock and get up at 8 o'clock the next morning, and everybody should get 8 or 10 or 12 hours of sleep. And Jude did not work that way. So sometimes I would go up to New York and I would do the grandma duty, and I would send my daughter and her husband out to dinner and say, let me handle the baby. And, grandmas can always get children to sleep. It's the grandma factor. We know how to do children, we know how to hold them, we know how to make them feel comfortable, how to let them rest against our body and breathe with us, and they just, and it was no different with Jude. But as I've done for all of my grandchildren, I wrote some songs to help them understand their life or experience their life. So one of these nights when Jude was crying and he wouldn't settle down, I wrote a song called Sleepy Time Jude. I based it off a phrase that his father uses. Every night of Jude's life, when it's time for Jude to go to bed, his father says, sleepy time, Jude. And then everybody starts to say, sleepy time, Jude. It's sleepy time, and the baby's supposed to get the message that it's time to go to sleep. So I used the father's phrase and made a little song. Sleepy time, Jude, go to sleep. Sleepy time, Jude, go to sleep. Sleepy time, Jude, go to sleep. It's time to go to sleep. Sleepy time, Jude, kinda sleepy, sleepy time, Jude. Kinda sleepy, sleepy time, Jude. Kinda sleepy, it's time to go to sleep and dream. Oh, sleepy time, Jude, go to sleep. Sleepy time, Jude, go to sleep. Sleepy time, Jude, go to sleep. It's time to go to sleep. Thank you for that snapping. I do that too, okay? So that became my song. It was me and Jude, and only Jude and I knew this song, and I would sing it to him every time he was in my care, and he would go to sleep. He understood somehow it's time to go to sleep. I want now to talk about the evolution of that song and Jude's use of that song over the last 2 years, because it shows one example of how music is so integral to his life that at first the song was a tool for the adults in his life as we tried to regulate his behavior and his mood. And then at a certain point, Jude took command of the song, and he now uses it as a tool for creativity, for control of the adults, for expressing his own feeling. And for me, it's a really important concept that a child has taken command of a musical idea or a musical tool, and he uses it in his daily life. So, example one, I sang the song to Jude. Eventually, his parents and the aunts and uncles heard me singing this song to Jude, and they began to see that it was effective. And so suddenly, when it was time for Jude to go to bed, my entire family would just begin to sing the song. And he would kind of get the idea, oh, it's time to go to sleep. And he would start to relax and regulate a little bit, and it was easier to get Jude to go to sleep. So it became a family ritual, not just a Jude and Mimi ritual. And we used it all the time. When Jude was about 15 months old, I started to sing the song to him one day when we were alone. My intent was to make him start thinking about taking his nap in the afternoon. I wanted him to go to sleep. And Jude immediately lay down on the floor and became perfectly still. He was pretending to be asleep. Okay, so he's taken the song, he's taken the intent of the song, and he's now turned it into a game. So he's learning how to pretend, how to imagine that he's asleep, and how to try to convince me that he's asleep so that maybe he doesn't have to take a nap. I'll pretend for 2 minutes and then it'll be fine. And so he just lay on the floor completely still, except his feet were going like this. He had to move to the song. And when the A section of the song approached its end, he jumped up and said, "Ta-da!" So it was part of his control game. It's like, I was only pretending to be asleep, and here I am, I'm not asleep. So he completely turned it into a game and took control of that piece of it. I loved that piece, and for several months, he used to do that. The last several weeks, Jude has begun to use the song as a signal to tell us that he's tired. He will begin to sing the sleepy time, Jude, go to... He will begin to sing it when he wants to take a nap or when he's ready to go to bed at night. So it's become integrated in him, and he thinks this is the way to communicate to others that he's asleep. And then the final one, which happened just last weekend, once again, his parents left the child with me, and my job was to have him take a nap in the afternoon, get him to sleep somehow, so Mommy can go shopping and Daddy can go shopping, whatever they were doing. And so I tried the ritual, I did the song, I read him his favorite books, I did everything I knew how to do, and he simply would not go to sleep. So the tune has ceased to be effective in that way. But after a couple of times through the song, he said, "I have sleepy time legs." And so he wanted to change the song and use it to, I don't know, whether he wanted me to touch his legs or whether he wanted to tell me that he knows the names of his body parts or whatever his intent was. He's using it now as a new tool for conversation, for interaction with me, for identification of his body parts, for use of language. And so we went through the whole body. He had sleepy time legs and sleepy time arms and a sleepy time nose. And he never did go to sleep, but we fully explored the song and all of the parts of his body. So I'm really thrilled that Jude is using that tune and other tunes as part of his daily life. Music is so integrated into his life that to him it's just a way to be. It's a way to communicate with other people. All right, so let's see. My next slide has to do with just all the kinds of things that we do in music class. I'm wondering if you do these same kinds of things too. Of course, we listen, and that's really important to music learning. Children have to hear music in order to be able to know music. Music is an important tool for interaction. The Jude story should have illustrated that. Imitating in music is very important. It's a necessary readiness for thinking or for using music in a tool in a different kind of way. First, the child needs to be able to imitate. We sing and chant. Sometimes we use words and sometimes we don't use words. Oh, that's interesting. That was meant to say usual and unusual. In other words, the songs that I sing for my grandchildren and for my students are not always major pentatonic and duple meter. Sometimes they're in a 5/8 meter or in Phrygian tonality, so that I give them that broad base of music experience. Sometimes we just use the patterns from music. Sometimes we move or dance. We use music for play, like Jude uses his tunes for play. Music should bring joy to life, joy to the experience. And this word may be new for some of you. Music should promote audiating or audiation. Audiation is to music as thought is to language. So if we want our children to truly integrate music into their lives, they need to have a deep and broad enough experience so they can actually think music and communicate in that way. One of the things I've done in the last few weeks to try to answer my own questions is I've conducted a little action research study. It's nothing that's publishable because I haven't followed all of the principles of research, but sometimes action research can inform us in the moment and help us begin to formulate better questions. So these were my questions. I intended to ask some of the adults I knew who are parents of children. What music experiences do your children have now? And what are the music experiences they love? And what music experiences did you have as a child? In other words, I was trying to find a link between the young parents I know and their childhood music experiences and the kinds of experiences they're providing for their children. I haven't found the link yet, but I need to ask more questions. My group, my N, was 10 adult parents of young children. Their age range was 35 to 43 years. The total number of children in this group of parents was 7. The children's age range was 12 months to 14 years. The parent occupations were these. There was 1 lawyer or attorney, 1 physician, 2 stock traders, 1 military officer, 1 author who was also a university teacher, and 4 full-time parents. So I had a variety of parental occupations, and none of them were musicians or music teachers. My results were not conclusive. This is why I can't publish the study. My response rate was only 30%. That means only 3 people responded to my questionnaire. This is somewhat lower than one would expect in action research. Usually you get a response rate of about 50%, but I'm still hopeful that answers will come in. And also, I found this to be very interesting. Only the males responded. Only the fathers responded. None of the mothers responded. It's not conclusive, it doesn't mean anything, but it was very interesting. Here are some of their answers to what music experiences do your children have and what do they love. Subject 1. All of our children love listening to a variety of music. Music inspires them to dance. Musical influences in our house are varied, from Coltrane and Miles Davis to Brahms and Bach. There's often background music in the house, whether it's my wife's classic rock playlist or something from my classical library. And he said, the iPod has allowed each of my children to enjoy music in personal ways. It gives them an immediate degree of control, a means to match their music to their mood. Subject number 2 said, our kids love to listen to music and they both love to sing along. We've used music several times to calm them down. That's how we say it in the U.S. We listen all the time and they sing along. And subject 3 says, we sing to him all the time. Sometimes he loves it. Sometimes he hates it. I find I use music to affect his mood more than anything else, either to calm him down or get him excited or help him snap out of a tantrum. This child is 2 years old. It's the tantrum age. He likes to hear us sing, but he's getting into singing more and more himself. Now, I find some common threads among these 3 respondents. If you look at the red text, their children all love listening to music in some form. And if you look at the blue text, all 3 parents or all 3 couples use music to affect the mood of their child. In other words, the parents are using music as a tool to regulate the child's behavior. The parents must perceive that music is important to regulating their mood, and they're using music to regulate the mood of the child. So my point in doing this action research study is that it's one thing for us just to decide what to teach and when to teach and how to teach it, but we need to be informed as to what's going on in the culture, what's going on in the society, and how is music being used in the home, and how can we either employ some of those methods in our teaching, or at least understand them so that we can be more effective teachers. And I'm getting the time signal, so I'm going to bid you farewell, and I will see you this afternoon and tomorrow, and thank you very much.